Hey guys, welcome back to Home Built, and this week we are back having a look at the tune on Harry. Alright guys, so a couple of weeks ago I took you through some of the logs and some of the data from the Link ECU on Harry, just so we can sort of see what's happening and see how it's running, originally just to see how the exhaust performed, but thankfully, I've been working with a bunch of guys on one of the forums I'm on who have got a lot of knowledge on these old air-cooled engines and of engine tuning in general. And I thought it would be interesting to go through and show some of the features and basically how to get a rough tune. At least today, what we're mostly working on is fueling. So I don't want to touch the timing too much. Because I don't have good ways of monitoring it, of picking up knock and things like that. I do have a knock sensor on there, but some of this stuff I think is better for the dyno. But at least if I can get my fuel curve running better, and I'll show you what I've got previously. I'll put a graphic up here so you can see that the fuel line target should actually be pretty much a straight line, and you can see that mine goes up and down all over the place, and the basically the air fuel ratio is sort of chasing its tail, and it's not very smooth. Basically, it was reasonably safe, but not very even, and there's a few things that we need to sort out on this tune, and I'll take you in the back here now and you can have a bit of a look. Okay, so one of the first things that was brought up when people looked at my logs, which I'm quite grateful for because I really have no idea about this sort of stuff, and I'm gradually starting to get my head around it and learn, and it's not as difficult as it may first seem. So basically one of the issues is my head temperature sensor. So on a regular water-cooled engine, generally what is used to get the warm-up maps ready is the coolant temperature. Now, coolant temperature is a reasonable way of working out exactly how warm the engine itself is, and how warm the cylinders are. It's quite a good measure of that, particularly because cars have thermostats and things like that, so it doesn't run the radiator until it's up to temperature. And a cold engine generally needs to run a bit richer to actually to run. It's just the way that the fuel vaporizes as it goes into the engine and that sort of stuff. Most of that's above my head. I just know that it needs to run rich when it's cold, and gradually taper that warm up regulation away to zero. So once the engine's up to temperature, then it just runs like normal. The trouble with air-cooled engines is these are air-cooled, but in some ways they're oil-cooled. Now, there are a lot of guys who use the oil temperature as instead of the coolant temperature, because obviously we don't have coolant. But the general consensus seems to be most don't like the oil temperature because the oil temperature takes too long to get up to temp, much longer than what it really should. And even Porsche itself, on the 964s and on the 993s, it actually uses a cylinder head temperature sensor, which is actually drilled into one of the heads of the car. We obviously don't have that. This is an old engine that's been converted, and this is my temperature sensor. So it looks like a bit of like a sort of a electrical terminal washer type deal that I've actually had bolted underneath the fan shroud onto the top of one of the cam towers. Now, the issue with that is that it's still not getting up to temperature, even after driving it around for about half an hour or so on admittedly a cooler day. I think the inlet air temperature was around 10 degrees, so you know the temperature in the air was about 10 degrees, but my temperature sensor on the cylinder head or on the cam tower was only reading about 38 degrees, or those of you in Fahrenheit land is about 100 degrees, I believe. So not hot enough, and yeah, so it's not really giving me an accurate measure. So for starters, I'm going to just double check this sensor and see if it is within calibration. And how I'm going to do that is I'm going to get some ice water, and then I'm going to get some boiling water and dip it in it, and just read off of the ECU off of the laptop to see what sort of temperature I'm getting, and use a little digital thermometer to see if they correlate. All right, so it's time for our test. Now, I'm not sure how well it picks up, but over on the side here, above that red line is my ECT value. That's the current sensor temperature. And I've got a mug here, and the current temperature in here by my thermometer is 77 degrees. So let's put the little sensor in the thermometer. 61, 62. It's taking a while to actually get up to temperature. I'm getting 70 degrees on my my readout, 71 and 62 on my sensor. So the sensor's reading, by my calculations, about 9 degrees low at that temperature. I've got another mug here with ice water, tartan fan, and let's see how it reads now. My thermometer is reading 1, but my gauge here is reading 5. All right, so I've tested the sensor at its high range and its low range, and it does seem to be out a little bit, but not out a great deal. It seems to take a while for the sensor to actually sort of get to those numbers, particularly when you're jumping between really hot and really cold. But ultimately, I think it works reliably enough to actually do the job. So I just let the water cool down to about the 40 degree mark, which is what this engine seems to be running. And it's running, the sensor is running bang on the correct measurement. So I believe that the sensor is doing its job the way it's supposed to. It's just getting the temperature to where it needs to be in its range. And after looking into it further, I can potentially clamp the sensor onto one of these fins, which is what some other guys do. They make a clamp and actually clamp a sensor that goes straight onto a fin of the head. The other issue with that is, though, is it's behind the fan, and the fan actually ducts air over the top to cool these fins down. So, and also the fins are obviously dissipating heat the further they get from the cylinder. So I don't know how much better clamping to here would be from up here. Maybe a little bit, but not a huge amount. All right, so the next thing I'm going to tackle is balancing these throttle bodies. Now, I want to make sure that they're all running basically the same. And the way I go through and double check that is with this little doohickey here. So basically, this is a vacuum gauge, and as I rev it up, I'm going to set the idle about 2,000 RPM, so it gives it a few revs. And there's a little red cap in here that'll float up, and you want to try and get it so it's sitting at about the same height on every one of the cylinders, so that you know that they're all running the same and you're getting the same reading from every one, so the same throttle opening. It's an old school way of doing it that has been happening since the time of carbies. Let's give it a go. All right, that was about 15 minutes, and the temperature got up to 50 degrees, so it's not super high, but that was a long time. My ears are ringing from sitting right on top of the exhaust. But I managed to get them all pretty well balanced. This bank was actually lagging slightly from this bank, so that may have been where my mixtures were a bit all over the place, particularly off throttle, which would make sense because when I'm flat on it, the throttle's blades are all the way open, and the airflow reading was pretty similar. But the lambda from bank to bank off throttle on cruise was out quite a bit. So hopefully now I've got that all sorted. They're all nice and even. So now it's time to put the air filters back on and go and give it a test run with my new map. Okay, so you can see on this log here, you can see off throttle before I actually get into it. The wideband sensors from each side of the car are a long way apart, and that is a real issue that I was trying to sort out with balancing my individual throttle bodies, because I think that's basically a sign of when the throttle blades are closed, that one is closed more than the other and they're not quite even. Whereas when I get into it, they get much more even. There is still discrepancies, but they're closer. But you can also see that they go up and down quite a bit, and what we're trying to do now is to try and balance that out. And basically the way we do it is we go along, and as you can see here, you can see the lambda for this setting. So if we just pick 5,000 RPM, so we got it pretty much at 5,000 RPM, you can see there, and you can see we've got the current lambda is 8.21, 8.13. We've worked out the average lambda is 8.15. Instead of just sort of going, okay, we need to add a bit more here and take a bit more there, you can actually sort of go, okay, the current fuel setting on the mixture map is 105. So the 105 is the current mixture setting, times by the current average lambda, which is 0.815, divided by the ideal lambda. So we'll say 0.85 is what we would like the lambda to be, and that gives you your new fuel setting, which is 101. And if we actually go through and change that cell, then we get our smoother map. It's really not that complicated. Let's give it another try and see how much better our maps get. All right, well, I've done a bit of playing around for a final check now. I think I should have my map just about where I want it now. I've gone through, as you will have seen, and adjusted the mixtures and everything to get them pretty nice and flat. And this is sort of the final little tweak. A couple other things I did check is I enabled my knock sensor. I realised it wasn't enabled before. It is connected and it just hasn't been enabled. So now I hopefully should be able to get a bit of a log of what's happening with knock in this test drive. And also, as many of you saw, the cold start's been really odd. Once it actually kicks, it's good, but it takes a long time of cranking before it actually starts. So I've had to play with the pre-start prime. So basically where that is before you even crank it, it actually opens the injectors a bit because a cold engine doesn't get the fuel in. It seems like it needs a bit of cranking, so obviously the cranking prime still needs a bit as well. We'll see, but I don't want to do too many changes in one hit. But now it's time to start it up and give it a test drive and see how it goes today. That was better. That was better. There was no throttle then, and it started up better. So good start, good sign. So this is the most recent run, and you can see that off throttle there's still a bit of a gap between the two banks, but nowhere near as big as what it was before. So we have definitely evened that up quite a bit. And then as you can see through the run here, we've got a much smoother air fuel ratio. So the whole way through it is much better. It's not perfect, and I've done sat down and I've done another bunch of tweaks to the fuel map to get it much closer than it was. And I think we're going to get it right. But you can see how much just that first run of alterations has made a big change to our fuel maps. So as you can see, it's not that crazy a process to actually do some street tuning, particularly with the fuel maps, to just get it nice and neat and tidy. And not too rich, not too lean. All right, well, that was quite successful. I feel like I have personally learned a lot about tuning and about getting the most out of the setup I currently have. Hopefully some of you guys sort of picked up some of the stuff that I was learning as well and have learned something out of it. I know there's going to be a ton of people out there with far more experience. Everybody's personal tuner is always the best tuner in the world. That's the issue with tuning, is this guy is always the best and everybody else doesn't know what they're talking about. So either way, I am getting much happier with the tune on this now. I probably will get it on the dyno again at some stage to really tune in, particularly the timing on the load cell. I've been talking backwards and forwards with Neil at Performance Developments, who helped build this engine, and he thinks there's still more in it on the timing side as well, and he's been working with me in the background getting bits and pieces right. But yeah, I'm really getting my head around the concept, and it's not as difficult as I first thought. The basic concepts of tuning is not anything that complicated. Just keeping your fuel levels even, and then just once your fuel level is about right, then you can just keep adding timing. That's all the tuner really does on the dyno, at least for a power run anyway, is to just keep adding timing until it doesn't take any more. Anyway, that's it for this week. So make sure, like, subscribe, do all that sort of stuff. And if you need to buy parts for any of your Porsches, make sure you compare prices at PorschePartsByJeff.com first. And we'll see you on the next one. See you guys.